This is our first ever Field Advisor Forum here at Memorial Stadium. And for sake of time, I'm not going to read off. Poor Kelsey did a whole, we have bios here of everybody. I think you're pretty well familiar of this group. We have certified crop advisors here. We are all certified crop advisors. The other main thing that I wanted when I gathered this panel was people that weren't afraid to speak their mind. And oftentimes throughout the year, I hear from these people, whether or not they are upset with something that they've heard or said or video or piece of marketing that they've heard within agronomy. And what it comes down to is sometimes, this phrase was mentioned, just because somebody is on social media or does a TikTok or does a tweet, or should I say X, does not mean that it's the truth. And so this has become something that a lot of my colleagues have become pretty upset about. I'm in a lot of agronomy groups within the industry across the US, and I'm constantly getting sent these videos and saying, are you serious? Or words that I probably shouldn't say up here on the stage. And with that, I also want to point out that these individuals here up on this stage are from different areas of the state. That is a big deal, too, because we know Illinois is not just central Illinois, where we are located now. We have the northern part, which, Kyle, you can represent us up as well as, and can
Sure.
you represent northern Illinois for us?
I mean, my wife's from Naperville. So.
Okay, that counts. And we have Kelly from the south. And so a lot of these individuals, you may hear or know them from, whether it be TikTok, podcasts. We have Kelly, who's steered away from social media after a while because he couldn't take it anymore. But all different ages, age groups up here, all different backgrounds. We almost all went to different schools. And so just take that in consideration when we're going through and talking. So I just want to take a couple of moments for each of you to kind of do a quick introduction of yourself and tell us what it means to be an independent agronomist. To you, Kelly, go on.
Well, I got to go first?
Sure.
Oh, okay. I'm Kelly Robertson. I'm from Benton, Illinois, which is south of Louisville, Kentucky. That's how far south we are in Illinois. Win a lot of bets with that one. 36 years as an independent crop consultant. Farmer, was a Pioneer seed dealer for a while and also with their Encirca granular program for a short time. Being independent means that I'm not representing a product or selling anything, and I see my job, and I've always seen my job as to promote the prosperity of my customers and the profitability of my customers, and that means to give them unbiased information, which means to tell them the truth and call BS when you see BS.
Thank you.
I'm Kyle Stull. I'm from Wisconsin. Actually, originally Indiana, so that's why I went to Purdue. So the Illinois thing's weird to me, but.
He had to make sure and say Purdue.
I worked in ag retail for, 15 years almost, and then quit to farm and be a Pioneer dealer. Didn't really plan on being an independent consultant. And then the farming thing just didn't work out. We'll just put it that way. The easiest way to put it is that. But then I ended up going into the seed dealership side and then doing some consulting. Eventually got out of seed. And honestly, I like working with my guys. My guys love that I do TikTok, so they're all ticked off right now. But yeah, I just kind of voice opinions, but my opinions are my opinions. It's fine. It doesn't have to mean that anybody has to agree with them. So.
Thank you. Karen.
I'm Karen Corrigan, and I've been an independent agronomist for over 20 years with McGillicuddy Corrigan Agronomics. So I work with growers from North Dakota to Tennessee and Indiana to Iowa. I guess for me, when we first started was kind of when all of our local crop educators and extension were being let go. And so we really filled that void of an independent voice. To me, it doesn't matter what you buy, as long as, I'll just tell you what will help you, but it's still your money, so you still have to make that decision. So I just hope to give you information to help you make a better decision.
So we met briefly just to kind of coordinate about today. And I said, can you give me a couple topics that you want to talk about? Well, the floodgates just opened. So we are going to just touch on a few of those topics, those hot button topics that get us going today really quickly, because I know you may have questions today. But let's each go ahead, each of you, touch on a few topics, and I'm going to go with biologicals first. So this is something we get a lot of questions on. I just also want to plug, and I don't want to get in trouble from Lauren or Kelsey, to not plug the Field Advisor webinar coming up. It's on January 22nd on biologicals, and you can find out more about it on fieldadvisor.com. But let's go through here. What are your comments, thoughts, feelings on biologicals? Kelly, you start.
Thanks. Yeah, I think there's a lot of snake oil and foo-foo juice being sold in the name of cutting inputs. Most of the people out here selling this junk don't have reliable, replicated research from sources. It's highly questionable what it does, what it doesn't do. You know, my first advice to anybody that calls me is, you know, if they can't tell you what's in the jug, don't buy it. And if you do buy some, just buy enough to try it, because there's no research or anything that shows that any of this stuff works.
Honestly, my opinion is always that we wish all those products worked. I mean, I tell that to everybody on TikTok. I wish those products all worked, but they possibly can't. There's no way that statistically every single product they're trying to sell you will work. It's just not going to happen.
I would just remind you that in a teaspoon of soil, there's over 1 billion organisms, and if you're putting a Coke can across 1 acre, how much of an effect are you really going to have? So I definitely would look for something that's proven. Second thing I would do is make sure you don't kill it before you put it on the field, because you know it's supposed to be living in the jug, and you're supposed to keep it that way before you apply it. So those are just some things to think about.
Okay. Next topic, round robin, is foliar feed, micronutrients. Kelly, you start.
I thought it was a round robin.
I'll start.
I'm circle, square, whatever.
Want me to start? I'll start.
Go ahead.
So I worked for a Winfield co-op for 3 years, and we really were taught the soils or tissue sample at V4 on corn. And you know why we were taught that? V4 on corn is when boron and zinc are deficient. And you know what Winfield sells? Max-N ZMB, zinc, manganese, boron. So you just have to be careful on timing and what products you're using, and look at some of those labels on some of those micronutrients. I mean, just the amount of nutrient that's in that jug is next to nothing sometimes. I mean, there's 5% chelated manganese products. There's another product that has 0.3% in it. Just look at what's in the jug.
Karen.
The more things in the jug, the less of each there is. Mm-hmm. And if that isn't your yield limiting factor, what's in that jug is not going to help you. So if that's not your problem, then the product's not going to do you any good.
Yeah, I think the biggest issue I have with tissue testing and micronutrients is that there's no soil sample taken when the tissue samples are taken, and so what we run into in Southern Illinois is that probably 40% of the time a tissue test that shows a deficiency, if a soil test is taken at the same time, also shows a pH problem, and so you know, you're not taking up what's there anyway because it's not available. And when you're paying $16 an acre for 0.33 pounds of fertilizer, I have a real problem with that, especially when it's not going to make any difference in yield.
You could pee on it for a lot cheaper.
What's that?
You could pee on it for a lot
Oh,
cheaper.
yeah. Yeah.
Just saying.
A good-sized St. Bernard can change the crop, you know. It's just, I don't know, it's comical to me in some ways.
Okay. Here's another one of my favorites. And I heard it not too long ago in a conversation that we had with a farmer that may be doing a on-farm trial with us in our on-farm trialing system at ISA. So sugar, humic acid. Karen.
Well, first of all, if you know much about sugar production, it's a cartel. And if you look at sugar, using sugar with your herbicides, that's more of a cult. So I guess that's my opinion.
I think Sean Connolly said it best. His last research paper he had on sugar was a spoonful of sugar helps the profits go down.
Yeah, he did say that.
I've got one customer that uses sugar, and it's in specialty crop production. And it's not for enhanced yield or anything else. It's for control of aphids. And we have actually seen in pumpkin production that we can eliminate some of the pesticide by the sugar. As far as any yield increase or anything, or doing anything for the plant, it's not happening. I agree with Karen, it's a cult.
Okay, so one more I have on my notes are, what are your pet peeves? I know a lot of people are doing cover crops, buzzword, soil health. Give us your thoughts on those.
What's your definition of soil health?
Yeah.
It's incredibly hard to give any real good opinions on what soil health is, because it's different to every single other person.
And around the world.
Yeah, and it seems like the more we look at some of the cover crop stuff, it just really depends on what region of the country you're in, what your Haney test says on the specific day you took it, because those Haney tests can be different from day to day, just like tissue samples can on corn. I mean, it's just, what is soil health is so different, and it's so hard to define it that it can be anything to anybody.
Okay.
I think the cover crop thing is probably the thing that is my biggest pet peeve, in the sense that cover crops are sold as the cure-all. I mean, it'll make you smarter, richer, make your wife better looking, get your kids at a degree. And the things that are promised through cover crops are not really real or obtainable. And unfortunately, the programs that are out there to promote cover crops and whatnot have done farmers a great disservice. In my county, we've got a grant to promote cover crops and whatnot. And so what we're doing is we're setting farmers up to fail with cover crops, because we're not doing any training, we're not doing any realistic expectations, and we're not teaching them how to terminate those cover crops and plant into them. And John Pike and I have discussed this. I mean, the benefits of cover crop are real. What we're doing to promote them is absolutely wrong, and the moral superiority that a lot of the cover crop community have, that they're doing it to those that aren't. And until we get this stuff to where we can apply it over thousands of acres at one time, it's absolutely useless.
I guess I'm going to go a little different aspect. I think one of our problems is that we all have problems with our neighbors all have problems controlling their weeds. So I think we need to really look at the fact that we need more non-chemical controls, and cover crops can be helpful if you use them correctly. But in order to do that, you have to let them basically be a mulch crop. So you have to let them get tall enough before you crimp them over or kill them in order for them to shade the soil. That works in years where we have a good moisture, not so great if we end up short on moisture. So there's a much higher level of management, but as far as helping us with weed control, I think that's one aspect that we need to look at.
Yeah, and Wisconsin talks about that all the time, and it's more in soybeans than it is in corn, just because of that carbon to nitrogen penalty that we got to deal with.
I also think on the soil health side of it too, is that we focus on all the Haney test and whatnot, and a lot of times the first thing, again, coming from the south, a little probably different perspective than what you guys all have north of I-70, but I mean, pH, if your pH isn't right, I don't know why you're worried about soil health. Your soil's not going to be healthy to start with. So, fix the basics first.
Okay, so basically, what I heard you guys say when we talked was that, I heard this phrase, and so I would like you all to comment on it, and I feel very strongly about this as well some days, but the death of the common sense agronomist or agronomy. How did we get here? I know can we blame it on social media? And what can we do about it?
I think it happened well before social media. I mean, it started, all the companies, if you're old enough to remember, they had salespeople and they had technical agronomists. And at some point, that became the same position. And what was expected of them was more the sales side and not the agronomy side. So I think, it happened well before social media, in my opinion. But when that position was combined, then it was more of pushing sales and having quotas and choosing products, and that based on profits for the company and then also the shareholders, and not so much the farmer.
Yesterday, I was driving down here, I listened to the Hefty brothers, and they were talking about spraying insecticide on every single acre. And they said that it doesn't kill all the beneficials because they just move into the neighbor's field, or they're in the neighbor's field, and since that guy didn't spray, it's okay to do that. That's just terrible. IPM is like thrown out the window when we start spraying every single acre with insecticide. And they're even talking about, they had an episode where they talked about spraying the ditch banks just to try to get rid of all the stuff that goes into the field from the ditches. It's just, I don't understand that.
I'm glad I got a smartphone that won't play that stuff.
RFP.
I think, if I look back at my career 30, even 20 years ago, maybe 10 years ago, I mean, most fertilizer dealers, retail locations, companies and whatnot basically had the same suite of products. I mean, you had DAP, potash, anhydrous, you had a UAN product, you had the same chemicals. I mean, everything was basically the same. And so the products that were being sold and the margins in those products was pretty uniform across. I mean, you selected your retailer or whatever based on service and what products they did offer. Now, I know one salesman in particular, he was told, hey, I got to go out and sell $2 million more worth of stuff or I don't get my trip to the Bahamas. Well, what are we selling? We're selling these products that are questionable to start with, that are high margin, and we're promoting this stuff without any science behind it. And so the common sense agronomy, and we can put stuff on Facebook or Twitter or whatever it's called these days, or Snap it or what, I don't know what it's called. It doesn't matter. But I mean, it's pressing the easy button. And all I got to do is tell you, I mean, that's the thing that all these products are 3 bushel. It'll make you 3 bushel. Well, if we'd use all of them, we'd
Or it'll cost you $6.
Yeah, it costs you $6, or it makes you 3 bushels. So if we used all these products, we wouldn't have to have the secrets of crop production. We'd just put all this crap on and we'd have 300 bushel corn and 100 bushel beans.
I think it's really interesting. You see a lot of picture comparisons like early in the season, and then come yield time, it's
Nothing.
crickets.
Yeah.
So that in itself should tell you something.
And then when you see yield results, it's this half the field versus this half the field, and that's the only comparison. Where I've seen them where that's adjoining fields not even treated the same.
Or the check moves around.
Yeah.
Or, yeah.
Yeah, includes the headlands with the like untreated.
You could go on and on. I also feel very strongly, and I know it doesn't always happen, but multi-year data as well. Yeah.
Anything can be a fluke once. What you need and to be profitable is consistency. What can you continuously use that will give you the best return on investment? And if you're curious about products, I mean, you can definitely look at them, but the universities have weeded out a lot of those. So if they've weeded it out, I probably would go look for something else.
So the Illinois Soybean Association is funding the most research it ever has, probably, I hope I'm saying this correctly, in ISA history. And I'm hoping I say it's 22 research projects. Jennifer is in the back nodding. And so we are very excited for you to hear more about that research today. We are highlighting a lot of the research that's been done in the last several years. And so obviously you've heard some of it already, but stay tuned for this afternoon and some of the breakout sessions. Most of the people that are here have been funded in some way by the Illinois Soybean Association. And so we're really proud of that and really making that a focus, as well as another thing that probably we really need more of in the state is on-farm trialing, or maybe to help more farmers get involved with that in certain areas that they'd like to learn more about. So with that, are there any questions for this group? Get them riled up.
Hi there. Adam Davis, UI Crop Sciences. We just saw that great presentation from Dr. Irwin about having a cost problem in crop production. So where would you recommend growers finding some cost savings? What would be the top recommendations?
I mean, if we're doing our job, they're already at their bare minimum of what they're going to put in. I mean, Other than cutting from some crop fertilizer budgets, we are making some changes with some of our pre-emerges on soybeans, and Wisconsin's recommendation is to throw out some of our residual on our post. Other than that, the biggest place to cut is to make sure you're evaluating extra products. A lot of this add-on stuff's where you're spending a lot of your money. I told my clients yesterday that we figured about $100 an acre of farm income this year, which Wisconsin's different. We paid like $150 for land rent, not $350. So, but we also get 75 less bushels of corn than you guys do. But if you're going to go out and gamble on something, you're gambling with 30% of your family's net income by buying a $30 an acre product that you might not need.
What I preach heavily to my customer base is Danny Kleinfelter's 5% rule. And so there's 5% cost that we can cut somewhere. And what we're looking at is cutting the cost out of all the extra junk we're throwing in, the additives, the stickers and all the stuff, the micronutrients into our foliar, or I'm sorry, into our fungicide applications, into our weed control programs. We're looking at a 5%, trying to do a better job, getting a yield increase of 5% by looking at proper product placement and populations on hybrids and making sure that we nail that down right in accordance with the seed companies we're growing with, because I believe there's a chance for a 5% yield increase there. And then your marketing, 5%, if you can get a 5% increase in your price. If you can do all three of those things in those three areas, it goes to over 100% return. And so we can go from a negative or a return per acre to a very positive return very quickly.
I would say, people always look to fertilizer first, but you can't know what to cut unless you know where you are. So one of the best things you can look at is just doing the soil test so you can see where you are, and maybe you need to spend more on one farm for fertility and less on another based on what those levels show. And then the other thing I'll just say is that, we put a lot of stuff in our tank mixes, and if it doesn't cheese, we assume that it's working, but there can be some chemical incompatibilities that you can't see and you won't notice until the products don't work like you expect them to. So just remember, surfactants are simple. There's no magic about them. They haven't changed in decades, longer than Fred's been here, they haven't changed. So that's just something to keep in mind. It's not magic. A surfactant is a surfactant, and you don't have to buy some super expensive proprietary one. It's still just a surfactant.
I guess I'll add in, a lot of people are realizing that there is integrated pest management, like Kyle mentioned, and that was not just in the coming years. I think in the last couple years, people have been asked, with help with scouting again, we've done field visits, whether or not they need to spray or not spray. That's come up. Another hot topic, and I just read an article about it, but I'm very lucky to have a brother that is a mechanic, and he is in demand. So much so he may, go out on his own, but just because there's so many people wanting their machinery to worked on. I think that's another big thing that's happening. Just looking at people are saying, whether or not to add seed treatment, multiple layers of seed treatment. We know that sometimes the SDS component of seed treatment is a lot higher cost. I've been getting questions on that, as well as the rootworm trait. Do we need that or not? You can trap. You can do the trapping if that is something you want to do. Most people don't. But that is something we've eliminated on our farm just because we don't have rootworm pressure there. So those are just a couple things that's come up in phone calls. I just got one last week. Do I really need, they have two planters, right? One for the corn, but do I really need to trick out my soybean planter? No, not really. Yes, for corn, but not necessarily until we, fund a new project, which I'd like to do, but not at this point in time.
And I'll just add in too, if you've already used several passes for weed control, you're probably at a point where the only way you're gonna kill those weeds is if you take the actual jug or tote and put it on the weed, and that you don't need to spend money spraying. You need to look at other non-chemical controls. And we have a lot of fields with a lot of resistance that chemicals just are not gonna be the answer anymore, so stop flinging the money out at them.
You guys don't pull weeds by hand like I do with a bean hook?
Our fields are a lot bigger than yours.
15 acres average size in my part of Wisconsin, so it's small.
Any other questions?
Just make sure you treat your beans so he doesn't get aroused.
I'm sad that Kyle didn't get out of hand and I didn't have to use my shirt on him.
I can't believe
Oh, good.
you just didn't come up. The Hefty brothers were called.
Were
Yes. You said it.
they? Oh, well, yeah.
Yeah.
I don't mind them, but it's just that IPM thing it's not cool.
Well, I think any social media, I don't even want to use the word agronomist, but whatever, is what the information they give or anybody else gives on social media, is it good information? I think the first thing you got to do is take it and frame it. You know, if you live in North Dakota and you're giving agronomy information, the chances that it applies to Franklin County, Illinois is pretty much zero. So you shouldn't be grabbing that information and trying it or living by it. I mean, that's the first thing. And you know, and then also who's sponsoring those people? I mean, that's my next question. You know, if they're constantly railing on about a product, chances are they're getting sponsored by it. So what are they making on the back end of that?
I would look at a lot of the ones with bigger followers more as celebrities. And so are you going to take your advice on heart medicine from somebody like Kim Kardashian, or are you going to listen to somebody who actually works in the industry and understands from a basic level whether or not something's working?
Have any of you guys used any test, and then do you have any advice on how to make the big amount of nutrients available that are in the soil available to the plant?
So I think the question was, has any of you actually used the Haney test? And then the second part of the question was?
I think Connor showed a large amount of minerals in the soil that is not plant available. Do you have any advice on how to move the needle on plant availability?
Okay, oh, sorry. So I will get in trouble if I do not repeat the question. I will.
We don't want you in trouble.
So Connor said there's a lot of nutrients in the soil that are not plant available. How can we unlock that potential as well? Sorry, go ahead. Amy, unlock the potential, Kelly.
I think the first thing you do is make sure that your pH, I can't over, you know, that has got to be, and so what, again, after that, you know, you know, in Southern Illinois, phosphorus is not really an issue. I mean, 70% of our fields that we sample, and we sample in 25 counties, I don't know, 100,000 plus acres of sample, well, 70 to 100,000 acres a year of soil sampling, 70% of the fields we sample, the phosphate levels are above the optimum. I mean, it's not uncommon for us to find fields with field averages of 70, 80, 100 on a P-test. So phosphorus availability, I'm always amazed at the thought that we need phosphorus availability products. You know, and do those products work that make them available? That's the next question. Can they show that those, you know, these availability things actually work? But the bigger question is on that, going back to Haney, is most times the Haney test is pulled in our area, and I'm speaking specifically to it. So soil health test is pulled and evaluated in our area as a way to sell something. And there's usually not any soil test or anything with it. The other side to that is, where's the calibration data? There is none. And so when Billy Bob shows up and pulls a Haney test on somebody and tells them that they need X, Y, and Z, I mean, we can argue all day long about the calibration data that the land-grant universities have on soil fertility. I mean, but that is well-researched data and it's published. There's nothing as far as benchmarks or calibration data for various soil types or management practices or crop rotations with soil health.
There's a lot of assumptions with the Haney test, I think. The other thing too is, so some of these products where we're talking about breaking down residue faster, great, that's fine. Maybe that first year you'll see some more availability, but the problem is we take a soil sample in the fall, we take one in the spring to show that it worked. We'd see the same thing almost in a regular field. It might be a little bit exaggerated with where you treated some of your residue, but it's not going to make a huge difference. And then at the end of the day, you're breaking down residue faster, so you're basically taking on a home equity loan on that fertilizer that you had in that residue that slowly would have been available over those 4 or 5 years. and you're taking it all at once without putting it back, which is what they're recommending. We just don't need any fertilizer. You're just going to put this on, you're going to get residue to break down, you get all the nutrients, and then you don't have to apply fertilizer. 4 or 5 years later, those guys that use those products are calling me and telling me my soil test levels are atrocious, I'm losing yield now, I can't believe I started using those products 4 years ago, and it's the biggest one that sells it right now. Their customers in their area that they grew up around are calling me now and telling me that that's what's happening to their soils.
Well, and you can mine for a little bit, but the bottom will drop out, and you will never be able to afford to get that back up to where it is with today's prices. So,
I think it's interesting. One of the things my major professor, when I did my master's degree, when he passed away, they cleaned his office out. One of the publications I got out of there was, I'm trying to remember if it was publication 24, it was C.B. Hopkins from 1908. Yeah, he basically warns against, biological products in a way, and mining, mining the soil, and that some of these products that we put back on in the name of trying to make things available don't work. So I'm, 120 years ago, nothing's changed much.
Yeah, and these biologicals, if they discovered a biological that you could spray on your soil that would break phosphorus down and it would stay there forever, they would never sell it to you. They would never make that product because then they couldn't sell it to you ever again.
and I think you need to look at where a lot of these companies came from, and a lot of them is investor money that have nothing to do with agriculture. And I think going forward with the way the economy is changing, we're going to see more of that investor money go back out of ag. So it'll be interesting to see what is left. But there's a lot of things that people make a startup hoping to be bought by a larger company, and that was really their only goal to begin with. It wasn't to have a product that worked. So those are just things to think about.
Good point.
You have a question in the back.
So I think his question up front there kind of was danced around a little bit in the aspect of, the question was, there's data out there, whether it's from a Haney test or whether it's university, that there is a surplus of nutrition in the soil profile. Do you feel like there are mechanisms out there that can help access that? Or do you feel like, no, fertilizer is the key going forward?
I think those processes, especially like some of the biological products, I think you can maybe speed it up, but it depends on what strain is in that and what's going on with it. There's some of the talk about putting sugar on, so we're going to increase our biological activity with sugar, or humics or fulvics. And I think it varies from soil type to soil type. In those bacteria that are in our soil currently, we try to say that we know what's going on. There's a lot of people that say that they know what's going on in your soil. When they do DNA testing, they say 70% of what they come back with for DNA testing, they can't identify. They don't know what's in it. And trying to tell somebody that your soil should have this amount of whatever bacteria in it isn't really accurate, because I don't know if my soils are going to be the same as yours, but I'm pretty sure they're not. And it's a lot of pseudoscience and trying to figure this stuff out. Maybe eventually we'll get there, but I don't think we're there right now. There's a lot of phosphorus there, but it gets broken down very slowly over time, and that's why it builds up in that soil. We used to use a lot more rock phosphate and triple superphosphate than what we do now. So,
And I think too, if you look at, again, speaking from my area, the likelihood that we're going to break some of that stuff loose and make it work for us, so to speak, on a 1.5–2% organic matter is a lot less likely to happen than going west of town here, where you're in a 5 or 6% organic matter. We just don't have it to start with to break loose, and the chances of it showing up. And I think going back to some of the information that was showed earlier, we've seen that, we can grow 100 bushel beans on a potash test that's a third of what's optimum. And that's because we are getting some of that release, and because of the way it's growing and what that research was showing. I agree with that. So are those nutrients available? Yeah. And, in our clay soils, especially our clay knobs, the time of day and the angle of the sun and how much moisture you got is going to determine more than anything else you do.
It depends.
It depends.
That got brought up last night, too.
I think the key is you have to, solve the big problems first, which his operation is past that. So he's probably in a little bit he's having to figure out things on his own because the rest of the people aren't there with him. So, is there something out there? Maybe, you have to work on cycling your nutrients, and that's going to be a lot in your system. So I'd say that you're a little bit farther ahead than most people, at least up here. I don't know back there, but and so it's hard to make a blanket statement knowing that if I say, oh yes, this will work, like for 80% of you, you're not there. So you have to look at your most yield limiting factor, and that's what you have to attack first. And I feel like, people will sell you micronutrients, but if your problem is potassium, micronutrients aren't going to help that much. So you really have to know for your own operation what the problem is.
Honestly, as an independent consultant, the thing that surprised me the most was that people tell me that's just common sense. I don't understand why you're telling me about this. And I'm like, well, your soil sample says 10 parts per million of phosphorus. I'm like, you don't fix that, you're not going to fix anything else.
I only know pounds per acre here.
Oh, parts per million, yeah. So it'd be 20 pounds per acre, yeah.
Oh, there's math again, Connor. Math. So with that, hearing that, do you encourage on-farm trialing then? And are you doing that a lot with your clients, customers? What are thoughts on that?
I think I will tell every one of my customers, whatever that, if it's a Haney test, if it's cover crops, if it's food juice, I don't care. Try some. Buy it, put it out. Let's do replicated trials. Let's do replicated strips, treating half the field and not half the field or whatever. And we're going to measure it with either a weigh wagon or a yield monitor and not looking in the grain tank saying it's 3 inches higher. Okay, sadly, that's how most evaluations are made. Is your yield monitor even calibrated? That might help too. Decide what some of this stuff is. So yeah, I totally encourage that, and we learn from that. And what we learn, the other thing too is the variability of the acres you farm. I mean, I've got customers that farm all the way from blow sands to black, highly organic soils down in the south. And so, what works on this side of the farm or in this field does not work over here. So you've got to know for your operation.
I think trials are always a good idea, and that's kind of where it ends sometimes, that it's a good idea, unless we come and dunk the jug in your planter or. So I ended up buying, I run a John Deere Gator, which you can make fun of me for that because I probably overpaid for it, I'm sure. But I run a Dakota FS manufacturing sprayer. It's 20-foot booms, essentially 8 rows at a time. I have a 450 Raven rate controller in it. I run an RTK setup from John Deere, and it all goes through a John Deere monitor. So in my mind, if I don't do it, they're not going to do it. So I pressure my guys for stuff that they want to try the next year, and I just take care of it.
I guess it depends on which client is asking, because some of them are super detailed and willing to do everything to a T, and others just don't have time. So if you don't want to put in check strips and you don't want to do the details, then on-farm trialing is not the best option for you. Some people just have too many acres to get across, and it's just not practical. So, definitely it depends on the grower and what their logistics and situation are.
Well, I mean, we all have those guys that at the end of the day, they're like, yeah, I don't have time for that plot, but what did my neighbors yield? And you're like, well, last year you said his data was junk because it's your neighbor. So it's just, I only got one laugh out of that.
I think the other thing that enables to do some research, and I'll put that in parentheses, is the precision farming tools we have. So you can lay out these trials and highlight them in the field and mark them and such so that, I just literally a while ago got a text from one of my customers showing his fungicide trial on the planter, and from the different fields where he had that marked out and was able to go in and pull that data out and look at the differences in yield. So you can do those things, lay them out this time of year and then look at them a year later and do it in such a way that it's not very intrusive.
Okay. With that, I'm going to say one last thing before I let DeLoss take over and give you your instructions. I'm looking out into a lot of hungry little faces out there. So I just want to give a shout out for all you guys today. Thank you so much for coming. You will be here later to answer any hard questions.
I'm leaving.
Secret questions.
If you're mad, ask Kyle.
I rented a car and drove from Illinois to here, not Wisconsin. So, if there's a truck out there with my name on it, that's somebody else.
So if you have not heard, the Illinois Soybean Association agronomy team is entering the realm of on-farm trialing. And so we have started to, if you use the word recruit, I don't know if that's the correct terminology, but accept applications for those that are interested in doing on-farm trialing. If you have any questions about that, see Deanna. We're also helping some of the researchers, like, for example, Dr. Nick Sider, who I see in the back of the room, recruit to get him some on-farm trialing for his ISA-funded research, as well as we are starting, and we want to do more, but in the coming year, we're starting out doing on-farm trialing soybeans with sulfur. And so if that's something that interests you, please see myself or Deanna throughout the day, and we'll get you some more information on that. So thank you so much.